I won't lie. Now, this is everything you say is back semi-public for locals, Father, but I won't lie. Yeah, I'm not a petty guy. That's not something I struggle with. I have my other struggles. Magnanimity is not it. But we took so much shrapnel, Steph and me, in the front of the face, proverbially speaking, for being one of the first ones in on this. That like once I found out that I knew from some of your talks online and stuff that this was an interest of yours, an intellectual interest. But once I found out you were doing the book, I was like, oh man, this is going to be vindicating. And then once Nick met with you, interviewed you, was like, he's like the only one that's lockstep. There are a couple of Orthodox. There's an Orthodox husband and wife, Eastern Orthodox, named Rachel Wilson, who's really strong on it. But the only other Catholic that's lockstep on it. So anyway, I really appreciate your time and
sure.
Anyway, so the follow-up question I wanted to ask you, Father, this one stems from actually a more technical perspective that I would offer as an action theorist. My mentor is Father Kevin L. Flannery at the Greg in Rome, one of the leading action theorist Thomists in the world, and then also Stephen Jensen at the Center for Thomistic Studies in Houston, another one of my mentors. I've studied under both those guys. So according to Thomistic action theory, it's the long and the short of it is what we say in criminal law. For something to be a violation of a duty, you have to have like a culpable actus reus, like an actual action that's wrong. And you have to have a culpable mens rea. This is like the criminology approach to it, but I think it's helpful. You have to have kind of both together. And so there are these misunderstandings of the teleology of marriage that we've talked about, and a lot of people putting their family of origin ahead of their spouse. I think the interesting one that's an easy pitfall for trad-minded people, good people, is putting children first. Because teleologically speaking, procreation is the final cause of marriage. And this is correct. I would never dispute this.
Right.
But this has been, I've noticed in trad, at the trad liturgy, after Mass, at donuts, it can be too easy to become an excuse for the common disorder of putting kids above the spouse. It's very disordered. While procreation is indeed the primary telos, or the final cause of marriage, marriage's formal cause is different. Remember, we have 4 Aristotelian causes. It's ergon is one flesh, marital love, marital eros, whatever you want to call it, meaning a kind of loving romance between husband and wife, whereupon an ergon can often be a secondary telos. And the example that's usually given by the moralists is a good analogy, I think, is human lips. Their primary telos is eating or speaking, but they have secondary uses that are really secondary teloi, secondary ends, such as whistling, which would only be an evil if it were self-contradictory with relation to the primary ends. And this doesn't just mean that it's like an opportunity. Well, it is immoral because you're whistling when you should be eating or speaking. That's not how it works. It's not conceptually contradictory of the primary end. And that's just because more roundly conceived, the formal cause, that intelligible principle, which makes go the whole thing of human lips, which makes them work, is that they have all of these, they have a hierarchy of ends and all that. I don't want to sound like the new natural law people like Robbie George and them, but there is a hierarchy of ends. And as long as a secondary end doesn't contradict the primary end conceptually, then secondary ends are real. They're not imagined. This isn't church modernism stuff. And they're listed immoral. And the reason I bring it up is this. You probably know where I'm going, but people will say, I'm sure you get asked more often, far more often than I do. Your father, Chad. I'm just Tim, but they'll say, Tim, where are you on this NFP question? Like Trent Horn last week did this video saying us trad, he named me specifically for my feminism position. Us trads are fundamentalists. We make up extra stringent rules that don't really exist. We come up with we borrow trouble, borrow stringency. I kind of agreed with some of his other examples. I didn't agree with it with me, but I'm saying, yeah, I do think this I think by even coming up with the nomenclature, NFP, that as an action theorist, I always say, I think it's a bit of a false dichotomy. I mean, we have rules governing procreation is the purpose of marriage. There are rules. It's got to be unitive and procreative anytime there's coitus between a man and a woman. But all days on a woman's cycle are technically fertile. They're lower percentage fertility.
Right.
But given that two things, given A, there is not an affirmative duty laid out by the church or the natural law to, for every husband and wife to have coitus, attempt to conceive on what's considered the two most fertile days. The science is not very,
that's right, yeah.
It's not very reliable science, and it's very new science anyway, that we even know about the fertile window. But there's not an affirmative duty, violation of which would constitute a culpable actus reus. So it's not like you have to have sex with your spouse on the two most fertile days. And in fact, B, that if two spouses practicing NFP choose to have sex on the less fertile days outside the most fertile window, that's also, as long as it's unitive and procreative, that's also not violative of any norms that the natural law or the supernatural law outline. So I do always tell people, I'm like, look, I don't really know what the rule is here, because I'm just an action theorist. I'm working a PhD on action theory. But yeah, I mean, this seems sort of like borrowing trouble. I think Pius XII addresses the kind of dispositional disorder that would result from a thought experiment. A couple who doesn't synthetically contracept. They use so-called NFP, the timing method, the Creighton method, whatever it's called, for like 50 years, and they never have a single kid. I think Pius XII says something like, well, we'd have to have another look at that. There's some sort of sinful or disordered psychology at work. But as an action theorist, I'd say you can never pinpoint the actual actus reus where they went wrong. So it would have to be a sin that's some other part of their psychology, right? I mean, like, do you get what I'm saying? NFP is not really even a res. It's not even a thing.
Yeah. So so there's when I taught morals, we would put it this way: intrinsically, there's nothing wrong with it, if that makes sense, because there's nothing practicing it. Pius XII is actually addressing. He says you have to have grave cause for it. He says you have to have a serious cause, and some of the moralists say, well, that just means it can't be light. Well, no, that's not exact. Serious in Latin actually means grave. It was the terms that they would used all along. But I think that so if you're talking about NFP and considered in and of itself, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it, because if there was, the church couldn't even recommend it even outside that context. Okay. So then what I find I find that in this whole discussion, there tends to be a few kind of things. So one of them, which you're kind of onto, which is some of the trads' basic attitude is, unless you're popping out kids every year, and some people can, some people can't, and some people want to, that's fine. But the point is that if the minute they see that you're not having the number of kids they think you should be having, they're just like looking down at you, and they just think that NFP is just evil. You can actually use NFP to get to conceive as well. But anyway, so the point being is that with in relationship to them, I think what the problem is that they have put it in the same category as contraception. It can become contraceptive in its mindset, I'll grant that, but it doesn't mean it is per se contraception as such, and because that's what they basically want to do it. Now, I would admit that a lot of the people that are using it for contraceptive purposes. They just don't want to go on the pill, or they don't want to use other means. But the point being is that so intrinsically it's not wrong with it, which is basically means it falls to, which is what Pius XII is talking about. Circumstances ultimately determine what the licety of its use, and so that's usually what I just got to tell people. I find that there tends to be two extremes. You tend to find people who say that you could never, under any circumstance, for any reason whatsoever, ever use it, and then you have the other extreme, which can basically say that you don't have to have any reason to use it. The way the church has always talked is that you needed a sufficient grave cause to use it. And that's why, even as a priest, there are times when people have come to me, do you think we have reasons for this? Yeah, I think you should. There's actually one time I told a guy, you got to get on NFP, because if you don't, your wife is going to lose her marbles. And literally, she was this close to being put in a rubber room.
Wow.
So there can, there can be perfectly legitimate reasons actually for its use. I think that, like I said, it's not intrinsically evil. That's why it shifts to circumstances ultimately.
Yeah, that's, I mean, this is what I thought. This is pretty much what I thought. And it's vindicating because people do want to have the terra firma of, what we call in law, bright line rules.
Right.
But, and this is why I think Pius XII says this, like, look, if you got married at 20 with your spouse, you die at 80, both of you, and you never had one kid, but you never artificially contracepted, we're gonna have a look at that, and we're gonna find some serious grave disorder
Yeah.
in your approach, and probably even there's a mental act too. I wasn't trying
Yeah.
to gloss over the mental act, which the common law actus reus mens rea thing does fail to distinguish that there are mental acts. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty much what it is. I guess people just want, is there something you could say on what constitutes serious? There is a kind of argument from silence where the church has refused rather obstinately to say. And on this one, I'm kind of with Trent Horn. I'm for leniency. If it's 2:59 on a Friday and we're counting down the last 30 seconds till the bell rings, and our strict teacher who normally throws homework assignments at us has forgotten to, it's kind of like, everyone shut up. Don't remind the teacher to give us more rules. I'm fine, because I will follow all the rules set out. But
Yeah.
what should people be looking for by way of rationale or justification for use of it?
Pius XII, he lays the categories out. He doesn't get into specificities. He just does
I know.
categories. So
Yeah.
he says, if there's financial reasons, or if there is, there can be psychological, sociological reasons. Obviously, if you're living in China and they're going to abort your kids, well, okay, things like that. But he just kind of lists those. These are kind of the categories. But outside of that, they leave it to because the circumstances can be so platitudinous or practically infinite. The church just says, look, these are the categories, here's the principles, and then they ultimately leave it to the people to actually apply it. And that's why I think today people have a hard time applying it, because they either go to one extreme or the other.
Interesting. Well, that's great. That's great, Father. And that's what I thought you'd say. And man, I interview lots of cool people on this channel, but it's been really a thrill to talk to you. And again, I'm gonna have to hook you up with Brennan and Audra, who came with this absolutely amazing discovery, much better than Myers-Briggs. Are you an ENFP or an
Yeah,
INFJ?
right, yeah.
That just preponderated everywhere. You wonder what wins are at the backs of some of these systems that just get them in everything. This system is amazing with primary and secondary traits. It's non-deterministic, meaning in terms of free will, it's compatibilist. It's beautiful. It's funny because they're like, you and Father Chad, you're both, it doesn't mean money, but wealth primary and approval secondaries. I was like, that's cool. Who else is a wealth primary? And then they go through and they type out sort of famous celebrities who, it's all using eyeball movements. Very, very cool. But anyway, that's an aside to sort of say goodbye a second time. I really appreciate you agreeing to blurb this thing, and I really, really have benefited even from this conversation. So thanks so much. And the locals are going to appreciate what you said on supposed NFP. I don't even like it as a term. I don't really even think it's a res, it's like an attitude.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I agree.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks. God bless you, Father. Thanks for your time. And I'd love to have you back on the show soon, actually, if you're down for it.
Yeah, give me a little bit of time. I'm trying to work on this book, but we'll be in touch, and then just let me know and we'll work out another time.
Okay, if you need anything, I know you're a master researcher. 1,000 pages is dead serious. I know your other books are close to 1,000, but at the back of this book, you sent you one. It is the combined bibliographies of. It can actually be helpful to you. Combined bibliographies of Case for Patriarchy and Ask Your Husband, and it is like everything ever magisterially said about the masculine and
Yeah.
the feminine and feminism.
Yeah.
So the back of that book might be helpful to you. And don't,
Yeah, no, it's actually really helpful because I actually have to review all those texts now and get them into notes. I've read all of them, but it's nice to have them all in place so I remember I got to look at that document again, you know, that kind of thing. So good. I look forward to it.
Sure. It's all there. And if you need anything, if there's anything I can help with in the publication or whatever of the book, I know you got it under control, but we are very, very supportive of that forthcoming work. So thanks for all that you do. And thanks for your time today. I'll let you go.
You bet. God bless you.
God bless you. Peace.
Bye.